Hello and welcome to Joined Up Writing Podcast. This is episode 20, where a little procrastination
can leave you without a list of things to talk about. Bugger it. Right. It's okay. I can write really fast and I can talk at the same time. It's good.
Yeah, preparation's overrated. That's what I say. I'm Wayne Kelly.
And I'm Leah Osborne.
And today we're going to be talking about self-publishing. We've taken 20 episodes to get to it. Well, 19. This is the 20th. And it would be a good opportunity to talk to Leah about it. She's got lots of experience. Some of the pros, some of the cons, some of the pitfalls. Why self-publish? Why not? So we'll be talking about that. So what kind of writing week have you had?
Oh, God. It's been one of those admin-y kind of weeks again, which I know are necessary, but I really don't like them. So it's kind of odds and ends, like making review requests and formatting a novella and deciding how I'm going to sell said novella, just through Amazon or just through Smashwords or both. That's something we'll talk about through the body of the podcast, and little bits like that. And I've managed to cram in some editing, but no fresh writing, which I suppose isn't that surprising considering where I am in my plan for the year, because I'm organised like that, apparently.
Well, that's right. Like you say, we can talk about that, but that's kind of one of the things that you have to bear in mind if you're going to be self-publishing different aspects of your work, different content and stuff. You can't be writing all the time, unfortunately. That's good. Yeah, for me, I haven't really done any fresh writing either. I've been busy and I've been away for a long weekend as well, but I have been editing. I mentioned a couple of stories that I wanted to sub to the same competition. I think you're subbing to the Writing Magazine crime competition.
Yeah.
And I had to... You're not going to get to do it.
It's not going to happen, though. I read it on Saturday and I was like, this isn't what I think it is it? And they said, no. Okay.
Fair enough. You've got a few days left. Well,
not enough.
6 days.
It's not
So I've been doing that. So I had to quite radically trim the short stories I had, because both of them were around. Well, one of them was quite a bit over 2,000 words, and it's got to be 1,700. I think one was about 2,300 words or something. So got that down to 1,700, and the other one was around about 2,000. So again, I've edited that. It wasn't just a cut and short job. I had to do some changes on it as well, because it was had profanity in it, and I needed it to be clean for that competition. I think it doesn't actually say anywhere that you can't use profanity, but I can't remember the last time I saw loads of effing and jeffing in the Writing Magazine, so I thought I'd better play it safe. I sold out. So I've been doing that, so that's ready to go, so I can sub that tomorrow, so that's good. I think I'm going to sub both. That was and ahhing, but I think I'm going to sub both. They're both different. One's a comedy and one's more serious. So get those done. So that's kind of what I've been up to.
Awesome.
And we've been doing lots of thinking about the podcast going forward, haven't we? We've been coming up with lots of ideas.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be really good, people. You're going to love it.
So we've got loads of things in the pipeline for that, and we want more ideas for that. Just to give you a flavour of some of the ideas that we've been talking about, one of the ideas is to have more regular, very, very short shows that go in between the normal weekly podcast, kind of like hot shots or top tips or quick bites or whatever you want to call them. We need to come up with a name. Maybe you can help us with that. They'll be less than 5 minutes, and they'll be giving you advice on a range of different things, and it might just be a quick piece of inspiration. It could possibly be a short story reading. We don't know yet, but there's going to be lots of different things. So that's one of the things. We're also now on YouTube, so new shows will be uploaded. Yeah, new shows will be uploaded to YouTube as we go along. And episode 19 is already up there. If you haven't spotted it already, you can do that. So it's just another way to listen to the podcast. If for some reason you don't like iTunes or you don't like listening to it through the website, you can go to YouTube, and you can, I know for some people that's easier to do on their phone, so you can do that. which is good. And we just want lots more feedback and lots more ideas from you guys. We want to start mentioning you guys more in the podcast and putting your ideas across. So keep getting in touch. And so on to today's show, which, as I said, is about self-publishing.
Wow.
Which I don't think we've kind of moved on from the conversation of, why, the difference, the pros and cons necessarily between self-publishing and traditional publishing, and the fact, is self-publishing like a fly-by-night thing and all that kind of thing? It's quite clearly not, as the last few years have shown.
Yeah.
It's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's not necessarily an either-or thing. It doesn't, there are lots of reasons for being traditionally published, and there are lots of reasons that you might want to look at self-publishing. So you've done lots of self-publishing, Leah. Yeah. So just talk us through. Can you kind of give us a bit of a timeline, if you can? You don't have to be dead specific with years and all that kind of thing. Give us an idea of some of your pseudonyms that you write under, some of the series and some of the books that you've got out there, and kind of where you started with it.
Okay, it's actually quite simple. I can mark it by when my kids were born. They were born in 2012, and I didn't start doing anything fancy until the year after. So 2013, I released my first short story, which I called Vicky and Lara, and I did that through my own publishing label company, whatever you want to call it, called Little Vamp Press. And I've been releasing the stories since then for a series called Meeting Each Other. And the last one I actually released in April. What is it now? June?
Yeah, June, yeah.
It is June. So I released the last one of that 6 in April, and then the compilation of all 6 plus a bonus one in May.
And that's good. So when you started with the Little Vamp, under the Little Vamp Press, just remind people, because obviously we know you on here as Leah, but just tell us your pen names and the different series and different pen names you've got.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, the Meeting Each Other series, that's the erotica side of what I do, and that's under Raven Shadowhawk. So if you spot that name, there'll likely be sauciness. In fact, there will be sauciness. I don't know what else to say. It will be there. And if you spy something by Ileandra Young, which is my other pen name, then that'll be fantasy or general fiction or horror, or basically something that's not smutty and dirty like what Raven does. And my first release under that name, again through Little Vamp Press, was May 25th, and that was Silk Over Razor Blades, novel length.
Brilliant. So you've got loads of stuff out there. So tell us, first of all, why you wanted to go. I know it sounds like a really obvious question, but just tell us why you wanted to try self-publishing. What made you go down that route in the first place?
2 reasons, actually, and I think you'll find these reasons repeated quite a lot. The first being that agents, publishers, because there was a phase when I was submitting directly to publishers before agents became such a big deal. The responses I was getting were positive, but not positive enough. So along the lines of, this is good, but not for us, or not right now, or the market is saturated with vampires, we don't want any more, that sort of thing. And I just thought, well, you think the market is saturated because it is, yeah, but this story, and I was doing Silk Over Razor Blades at the time, so it was the vampire story. It's different enough, I felt, that there would be space for it if somebody would give it a chance, and nobody was giving it a chance. So the way around that was to do it myself, which leads on to the second reason, which is I am mad anal about my art. So I want it to look the way I want it to look, read the way I want it to look, feel the way I want it to feel. And if you go the traditional route, you lose a lot of that because you have to follow what you're told, essentially. And I didn't really want to do that if I didn't have to. So the self-publishing route worked quite well for me in that regard, because everything falls down to me to decide. Even if I commission the work out, I still make the executive decisions on it, and that suits me very, very well.
So when you first did it, how has the process changed in terms of when you first started? How did you decide how you were going to do it? Because I know obviously there are different ways to do it. So just talk us through some of the different ways to self-publish it. It's not just a case of, oh yeah, I'll just throw it onto Amazon or whatever. How does it actually work, and what are some of the ways that you can go about it?
Well, a lot of that depends on what you want as your end product, because if you're happy to just see digital sales, then maybe Amazon is actually the way to go for you because you've got quite a good reach. If you want a book you can hold in your hand, then there are multiple ways to do that. You can use Amazon's Create Space to do it. You can have it formatted and send it to a printer, and then you end up with a box of 100 or 200 books, or 500, depending on how you pay for it. Or you can go to a self-publishing company and potentially do both. You pay them their fee and they'll help you with all the bits and bobs that I'll talk about later, like editing and cover art and proofreading and marketing. And once you've paid that fee, they'll take you through it stage by stage, but you're still self-publishing, and you'll end up with a digital product if that's what you want, or a physical product if that's what you want, or both. So there's all these different ways to do it. And at the beginning, I must admit, I did not research the way I wish I had, because I just, essentially, I knew that if I spent too long researching, I wouldn't do it because it looks scary. And even though I've been reading blogs about it for quite some time beforehand, I still didn't know as much as I know now. So I pretty much just went to the only place I knew of, which was Amazon, and went, take the file, and here's a cover, and go. And it was done. And that's oversimplifying it, but I didn't use smash words until sometime after. I didn't understand why I wanted to use smash words until sometime after. Again, it was just something I did because I thought I should, which I don't recommend. Make sure you know stuff before you begin, people.
So the first bit of advice you'd give, it seems obvious, but is to just hold your horses a little bit, be a little bit patient, do some research.
Hell yeah.
Into what works best for you. But essentially, if you've got a short story or whatever it might be, you can literally just go, set an account up on Amazon. How does that work?
You go to Amazon. If you've already got an account with Amazon, you can just use that, actually. So if you've ever bought anything with Amazon, you have an account and you can use those details to sign into KDP. It's kdp.amazon.com, which is Kindle Publishing Direct. So KPD, or Kindle Direct Publishing. It's Kindle Direct Publishing, yeah, so KDP. That is what I meant. And you'll be given a dashboard and you can fill in all the details in there, what the title is called, who the contributors are. If you want to include editor and cover artist as well as the author, you can put that in. You put your blurb in, you upload the file. It does all the conversion for you, so long as you don't have it full of weird formatting when you upload it. Word files, so .doc or .x files is what they want. You upload your cover, you set your price. And if I were to do that now, it will be ready by tomorrow and people could buy it if they can find it. It's actually a very, very simple process. It's the stuff around it that's complicated. It doesn't have to be, but it can be.
So when you say the stuff around it, what sort of things are you talking about?
Things like organizing yourself as a publisher, if that's what you want to do. I mean, I've set myself up as a publishing body, so I'm a sole trader trading as myself, but I'm also a publisher. And that was to give the whole process a level of professionalism, which I don't think it would have otherwise had. I also bought myself a list of ISBNs, which again, you don't have to do if you're publishing with Amazon. In fact, if you're publishing just with Amazon, they give you an ASIN, which is automatic with every single book you produce, and it's their version of an ISBN, so you don't have to have your own. But if you, again, want that level of professionalism, if you want to be found by larger distributors, if you want a chance of getting into bookstores or being distributed through other channels, then having an ISBN is that extra layer. Means you can be found by the British Library. For instance, you go into a catalogue, you're listed with Nielsen's, which is where you buy the ISBNs from in the first place. So there's all these little things in the background.
So an ISBN gives you, like you say, you basically appear in libraries and you can be in a bookshop and all those kind of things. Is that why you'd have an ISBN? Yeah.
I mean, if you went into Waterstones now and gave them the ISBN for Silk Over Razor Blades, they'd find it. They wouldn't be able to order it because I don't distribute through Gardeners because I'm not big enough and I can't afford to give them the discount they'd require. but they would be able to find it. And if you talk to them very, very nicely, they might be able to order it through Nielsen's. And that's because I have an ISBN. If I didn't have that, it would use CreateSpace, an ISBN provided by CreateSpace, and they wouldn't order it. They just say no, because it's very obviously a self-published title.
So, sorry, Leah, can you just come off the mic ever so slightly, because I'm getting pops on the...
Okay,
just ever so slightly, just distorting slightly.
Yep.
Great. So if you were... so basically, from what you've said, it sounds like there are a few questions you need to ask yourself before you hit the go button on your self-publishing venture. Would you say that's fair to say?
Very much so. Very, very much so.
So some of those questions that you've kind of mentioned so far is where, well, the format that you want your book to appear in. So we're talking, because most people would think nowadays, if you said self-publishing, not most people, that's not fair to say, but a lot of people would think it's only digital. We're just talking about an ebook.
Yeah.
Because self-publishing, if you said self-publishing like 10 or 15 years ago, you'd think vanity publishing, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that, or the poor sod who's got a box of 200 books in their attic that they can't sell. You know, because you could, and you still can, just go to a printer and say, print this for me, make it a book, and they'll go, yeah, okay. But you have to buy those in bulk. You can't just print one.
Yeah, yeah. So do you think that's probably why in some quarters self-publishing has still got, with some people, it can still have a little bit of that kind of hangover from that period of time? Some people, you say self-publishing and they think, as you've just said, oh, a great big box of books hanging around, or you know, or vanity publishing. Do you think there's still an element of that? Do you find that when you talk to perhaps older people or people that are not as au fait with it?
It depends who they are. If I'm talking to someone who just likes reading books, they don't care so long as they get a good book. If I'm talking to other writers, I suppose I'm quite fortunate that the circle of writers I'm part of understand how the industry is changing, and that self-publishing is a completely legitimate part of that. But I suppose if I went to certain conventions or literary festivals and said, yeah, I'm a writer and I'm self-published, I'd get the snotty nose, you know, because that stigma, it's fading, but it is still there.
Yeah, I understand that. Okay, so putting that aside anyway, so we were asking, so some of the questions, so one of the things that we need to think about is the format. What kind of format you want your book to available? Do you want it to be just an ebook? Do you want to have it available as a paperback or possibly even a hardback? And you've already mentioned one, which is CreateSpace, which you can have is it just paperbacks, or is it paperbacks and hardbacks? Can you specify the format on CreateSpace?
CreateSpace does paperbacks and audiobooks and CDs and DVDs, actually, but they do not do hardbacks.
Right. So they do all the other stuff. So you can have paperbacks on there, so you can have a look, and it's essentially it's kind of done to order, isn't it?
Yes, they're print on demand. So your book doesn't really exist. It's not stored anywhere. Somebody will order your book through the CreateSpace store or through Amazon. That order will go to the printer. They will print one book, pack it up, send it. That's why it's so easy to do. That's why there's no initial cost, because I don't have to do anything until they get an order. Which is quite a nice way of doing it, actually.
That's good. So there's not any wasted cost or anything.
Yeah, it's great.
So the format's one of the questions. Whether you ever want it to appear in what would be classed as like a traditional bookshop or in the library or whatever. So that dictates whether you need an ISBN. You talked about you've basically established a publisher. Was one of the reasons that you set up with a publisher so that you could get those ISBNs as well? I think. You have to be a publisher in order to get them, for starters. But I also, because I knew I was going to be publishing under two names, I wanted something to link them together. I wanted a way to sort of keep it whole, if you like, and to make it a business for me.
Because I think that's the biggest thing. Self-publishing, it's not an easy kind of, I'm going to publish my book and then it's done. It's a business, and the act of setting myself up as a publisher forces me to think of it as a business and to make business decisions, because otherwise it would just be a hobby, and you treat your hobbies differently to how you treat your business.
So again, that's yet another question to ask yourself if you're thinking about looking at self-publishing, is what you want out of it, and whether it is just a case of you've written a novel or a story and you want to get it out in the world, and you just want the chance to be able to say, hey, everybody, go and have a look at this story. So if that was the case, you think probably just run to, well, you don't have to sell it, of course. You could just put it on Wattpad or some other online or on your blog even, or whatever it might be. But if you wanted people to pay for it and you wanted to get that sense of what demand was out there, you could literally just go straight onto Amazon, set something up and just put it out there essentially.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to look at it as a more longer term professional venture like you are, then you need to think about some of these other business decisions, like setting up as a publisher, maybe getting ISBNs, and thinking about the profile and what you put across to the reader.
Yep.
So what's the name of your publisher, by the way? Did you say that, of your publishing?
I did. It's Little Vamp Press.
Oh, you did. You're right. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I wanted to cross the little black dress and something to do with vampires. I didn't care what it was, as long as it was vampires. And that's what came out.
That's good. It does what it says on the tin. That's cool. So, so having asked yourself those questions, so then you went out. So you mentioned earlier on, you mentioned a smash word. So I'm guessing that is to do with, again, where you want your book to appear and which channels you want to sell it through. Because again, some people, because Kindle is so, popular now, the actual brand Kindle and Kindle Reader and et cetera, a lot of people would just think, well, it's kind of one of these vacuum cleaner Hoover type things.
Yeah.
People just say, I've got a Kindle book, or can you get it on Kindle, even if it's not a Kindle that they're reading on, even if it's another device. So talk to us about that. So what other considerations do you need to think about when you're thinking about how people can read your book?
If you want global distribution, Amazon's really good for that. But you need to consider that not everybody likes Amazon. I mean, I know a bunch of people who actively boycott Amazon because of how they treat their staff, how they price their books, their practices with tax avoidance, all this business. So they will not buy through Amazon. So there's a bunch of people that you just can't reach. Because they won't use a Kindle, they won't use the Kindle reading app, they won't do any of those things. So if you want to reach those people, you need to do it another way. And Smashwords is one way to do that. Smashwords.com is, I think it's run by Matt Coker or something similar. He's the CEO, and it's a site through which you can upload your books. They will convert it for you into multiple formats, and then they will distribute to places like Barnes and Noble, to Kobo, to iBooks, to the one that Apple does, and there's a whole list of people that they distribute to. You are perfectly able to visit each of those places and do it yourself and upload your book to each of those sites in turn. If you don't have that sort of time, Smashwords is one way to take care of that, because they will do the distribution for you, and their fee, when I think about it, is nominal.
So they
different formats.
So they basically do all the legwork for you. You basically upload it once, and they format it they basically produce it in all the different formats.
Certainly do. It's really quite handy, yeah. I mean, there are loads of guidelines you have to follow, and if you're using Smashwords, your base document has to be formatted in a very particular way to allow them to convert it into multiple formats. But once you've done that, it's actually quite easy to just let it go and see where the sales are coming in, if they're coming in. And that means you can target readers in each of those different channels as well. Kobo, for instance, that's is W.H. Smith's brand for e-reading. So if you go into a W.H. Smith's, you can buy a Kobo reader. You can't buy a Kindle. They're not going to do that because it's a direct competitor, but you can go to their Kobo store, you can buy a Kobo reader. And uploading your book to Amazon is not going to reach Kobo customers, but doing it through Smashwords will, because they will distribute that way.
That's really good. So, again, something that can put a lot of people off, especially people that are not necessarily don't consider themselves to be amazingly computer literate or technically minded. A nice little drink you can hear pouring there.
Sorry, it's my tea. I didn't think you'd be able to hear it. I'm done now.
Yeah, for people that aren't technically minded or you know, are a bit frightened of some of the having to use some of this technology, can I just, you know, run something off in Word like I would normally? Send a Word document and it'll be fine, and it'll just become, and I can use it as a book. I can just self-publish that.
You can if you want it to look rubbish. Unfortunately, that was really quite harsh. But what I mean is, Smashwords in particular. Oh, thank you. It makes me sound horrible and snotty.
No, because that's why I asked it. Because I know it's not. A lot of people will, you know, think. You know, if you haven't looked into it before rightly, they will think, you know, you can just write something as you would normally in your word processor. It's words, isn't it? Put it up to something and it'll just be formatted.
Nope.
It doesn't work like that.
Unfortunately, no. Smashwords in particular has a very strict set of guidelines. And if you don't follow it exactly to the letter, it will keep chucking it back at you. They might publish it through their website and people might be able to buy it through their site. But if you don't format it the way they ask you to, they will not distribute to the other vendors. They have something called an auto vetter, which goes through the document automatically and checks it for errors, and it looks at how you've made your table of contents, and if you've got weird formatting in it, weird symbols, any words that you shouldn't include, like Amazon, for instance. If that's in there, they don't like it. If you have book in there, they don't like it, or paperback, they don't like it, because you might be misleading people by saying it's a paperback. You know, there's all these weird little things. The very first time I did it, for instance, I paid for my formatting because I had no clue what was going on. And when I got the two files back, one for Amazon, one for Smashwords, I couldn't see the difference because they looked exactly the same. But after the third one, I realized that the one for Smashwords was formatted completely differently, because it had to be to get through their auto vetter. Otherwise, it would just get chucked back and they'd say, no, we're not publishing it. We refuse.
So you mentioned there when you were first starting out to find your way, you actually paid for that to be done. Was that quite expensive, or was it something, you know, was it, I mean, it sounds like it was worth it in the long run because presumably you then worked out how to do it yourself, or?
Yeah. Here's a plug for Karen, bless her. I went to a lovely lady called Karen Perkins from Lion Art Galleries. She was recommended to me by Jordana East, who used her for the first novella that she produced. And since then, I've used Karen loads because she's amazing and she's reasonably priced. She did the formatting for my first 4 short story releases, and the formatting for Silk Over Razor Blades, which was the Create Space template, which is something all on its own, and the Kindle one. I chose not to release that book through Smashwords, which I'll talk about a bit later. So there was only 2 sets of formatting to do for that rather than 3. But yeah, she did that all for me.
So she gave you a template, did you say?
No, when you publish through Smashwords, you have a template based on your trim size. Trim size being the dimensions of the book, so height by width. And obviously you have to lay the text out to fit the page size, so you have a different template depending on your trim size. So she did that for me, making sure the chapters were all consistent, that it was numbered correctly, that the headings across the top, like author name and book title, were consistent, getting my back data to read properly, getting the front data to read properly. She did that formatting for me before I uploaded it to CreateSpace, because I didn't know how. Now I do, but at the time I didn't know. I had no idea. So
all of these things, I mean, if you've kind of got a bit of a budget, and if you're terrified of it, there are people and services out there that can help you do all these different things.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously we're looking at this from a beginner's point of view. I mean, I should imagine people that know anything about it or have already started self-publishing, and a lot of this stuff they'll know anyway, but from a beginner's perspective. So what are some of the other you've mentioned at the beginning this idea of control, being able to control all the different aspects. So we're talking about the text and we're talking about the formatting, but tell me a little bit about the other things that you got control of. So you mentioned earlier, before we actually started recording this, you were talking about you've been shooting book covers today. So tell me a little bit about things like that.
Self-publishing, everything is down to you. So book cover, what do you want your cover to look like? Do you want an illustration, or do you want abstract art? Do you want a photo? Trim size for the book itself. If you're having a paperback copy, you can have massive ones that can't fit on somebody's shelf, or you can have really tiny ones that have the same problem, or you can go for a nice standard industry size. You can choose how you want to price it. That's very important. You decide, how much did it cost to produce this? How much is my work worth? How much of a royalty do I want to make from it? Do I expect to make any sales with it set at this price? And then you make the decision on how much you want to sell it for. Your marketing, that's all down to you as well. Do you want to market through Twitter or Facebook, or do you want to run it across a blog? Do you want to do a blog tour? Are you going to try and get media attention in the form of radio interviews or newspaper articles? You're going to write your press releases. You can decide if you want to give away review copies. And this is something that I hadn't considered before producing a physical book. There is a cost involved with giving someone a copy of your book. Is that a cost you're willing to cover yourself in the hopes that you might get a review in exchange? Because reviews are very important when you're an indie author. And I mean, even down to the date that you release your book. I think I read somewhere that a lot of traditionally published books are released on a Friday or a Thursday in this country to match something going on in the US. I wish I could remember it clearly, but I can't. But most of my books release on a significant date in my life. So my parents' birthday, or my sister's birthday, or when my sons were born, or the birthday of my pen name, or Valentine's Day for one of them, and that's something else I get to pick. But
so you've got complete control over the whole process. So, and I mean, a lot of those kind of things, marketing and promotion, it's probably something that we'll cover in more in detail in probably another future episode, because these are all the different things. I mean, arguably, a lot of those things now where you would consider in the past to be traditionally published, a lot of those things you thought, well, that just gets handled by someone else. But I know now that isn't the case even with traditional publishing, is it? A lot of places will be, you still have to do most of the most of the promotion legwork yourself.
Yep. Unless your name is Stephen King or J.K. Rowling, they are not going to put money into you unless they are convinced they will get it back, which means that most of the legwork for advertising is down to you.
Which is probably just another argument for going down the self-publishing route. If you're going to have to do it anyway, you may as well have control of the whole thing.
Yeah, and not have to pay a publisher for not doing much for you. Although that's not true, and I shouldn't say that. Publishers do a lot for you, just not as much as people want. Is the idea I'm starting to get.
Yeah, I understand that. But I think in the past that was one of the big things against. That was kind of one of the other big arguments against self-publishing was, yeah, but I'm going to have to do all the self-promotion, I'm going to have to do all the marketing, and I'm going to have to sort that out.
Yeah.
And that is still the case for traditional. It's more and more the case with traditional publishing. You do get a lot of help with it, and you get a lot of advice, and you do get more resources than you would if you're doing it completely out of your own pocket, which is the important thing. But it's not as it used to be from that point of view. So that's something to bear in mind.
Yep.
When you're putting these things together. So you have written, so imagine now, I've written my first novel and I think, right, I just want to get it out there. I don't want to look at traditional publishing. I'm really interested in this self-publishing thing. Mm-hmm. What would be the first thing that you would suggest that I do?
Editing.
Editing, right.
God, yeah. Because what I find is, well, in my experience with the books I published, even when I thought it was ready to go, I thought I'll just have one more check, which was just my way of procrastinating and avoiding doing it because I was scared out of my mind. Once I'd sent it to an editor, again, I paid for Karen's services, I realized how much there was still to do, if that makes sense. There were still things that needed to be cleaned up. There were typos littered through some of these bits. There were grammatical issues. There was a huge continuity error in Silk Over Razor Blades before I got it back and went, oh my God, I'm glad I sent this to her because I wouldn't have spotted it myself. So yeah, if you're going to self-publish, even when you think something's ready, if you haven't had it at least looked at, even by a beta reader, don't you dare press publish until you've done that, because you're only going to feel silly if somebody comes back with you and to you with an issue that you probably could have dealt with if you'd spotted it, but you can't necessarily spot something that you can't see without having help from somebody else. You don't have to pay for editing if you don't have the money to pay. There are ways to get around that. Something I'd like to talk about in future episodes, actually. Paying for editing without paying, if that makes sense. But
well, that's probably something. Yeah, I mean, we are actually going to be looking at editing, self-editing, and editing in general in episode 21 in the next episode. So that is something that we can talk about, and we can talk about some of these tips. To get to other things if you're on a budget, but so going back to that with the idea of being on a budget and looking at some of the other areas, and as I said, we'll focus more on editing in the next episode. So, for example, you talked about artwork and cover artwork. Mm-hmm. You're guessing you want it to look professional, but yes. If you're on a limited budget, what sorts of options have you got available to you?
Okay. Well. Do you have a limited budget or do you have no budget? Because if you have a limited budget, there are places that you can spend your money. And one of those would be cover. The other one would be editing. And then if you can do the other stuff for free, do it for free. The problem with covers are that's the first thing that somebody sees. And you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. That's the cliche, but everybody does. So you have to make sure that the first thing people see is what they expect to see from what you're presenting yourself as, which is a professional author who knows what they're doing. Even if you're not, you have to blag that. You know what I mean? So there are options. If you have friends who are good with artwork, then, bother them. If you can call in favors, certainly call in those. But there are places online and communities whereby you can get work made for a decent price, but you just need to be cautious about who you speak with. One of those places is Freelancer. I'm sure most of you have heard of Freelancer. It's kind of the eBay of the freelancing world. You put a job up and people bid on it. And the ones you like the bids of get to do your work and when you pay them. Another place is Fiverr, where all the jobs are called gigs. And a gig will cost you $5. And then any extras that you add to that gig will increase the price. That's actually where I've got most of my covers done. Oh, God, and there was another place as well. And I can't remember the name of it. But it works in a similar way to Fiverr. I think it's the British version of Fiverr, because Fiverr's the US-based one, which is why everything is $5 as opposed to £5. Although that works out great for me because of the exchange rate. Not complaining about that. It's actually really good.
Yeah, Fiverr is really good. So cover is really important. You can look at Fiverr and is it Freelancer or Elancer?
Freelancer.
Freelancer, okay.
I think there's one called Elancer as well, maybe.
I think there might be something different though. Okay, Freelancer and Fiverr for your cover. You've got editing to cover as well. And then some of the other things with self-publishing presumably is you can break some of these so-called rules. So in terms of word counts and things like that, what does it matter? What sort of rules are there as regards word counts and what you call something, whether it's a novella, we've talked about this before a little bit, but novella, short story, novel, singles, you can do Kindle singles, can't you now as well?
You can, yeah. I think the Kindle single, I don't fully understand what they are. I haven't researched it properly. But the cool thing about self-publishing in terms of word count rules is you can publish what you like, but you have to be honest. So if you're publishing a short story, that's fine. Make sure that you price it as a short story rather than as a novel, and make sure that people aren't misled into thinking it's something longer than it is, because people will feel cheated, and that's not fair. But in terms of publishing an ebook, there are no rules because it's digital. So you can make it as long as you want, you can make it as short as you want. But if it's too short, just make sure it's worth the time to actually do it. Because if it isn't, you may as well collect it up with something else or extend it a bit. You know, I wouldn't release a single piece of flash as an ebook, for instance. People have done that. I've seen them on Smashwords, but I personally wouldn't do it because I'd have to generate a cover for it. I'd have to format it. I'd have to do this, that, and the other. And for the sake of 5,000 words, no, 500 words, it just doesn't seem worth it. But 10,000 words, which is what the Meeting Each Other series was, each story was about 10K. That was worth it to me. So for each one, I produced a cover.
And it was worth doing, looking at it like that.
Mm-hmm.
So just looking at sort of rounding things off, you need to ask yourself a series of questions if you're going to be looking at self-publishing. But as usual, the most important thing is to actually keep writing and write something in the first place, obviously, because you need something to self-publish. Ask what you want out of it. Ask kind of the formats that you want to make your book available in, where you want people to be able to buy your book, whether you want it to be a local market, a global market.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, just give it a go. There's nothing to stop you just going and trying it from the get-go, just like you did right from the beginning, and just dip your toe in and have a bit of a go. There's nothing to stop you kind of learning as you go. And obviously there's tons and tons and tons of information online.
Yes.
Loads of examples and stuff. And I'll find a couple of articles and put them in the show notes anyway.
I can give you some of the ones I used if you like. I've got a whole page of, I've called it posts I like on my blog, and it's got loads of stuff on self-publishing in it.
Well, yeah, send me that link and I'll put the link to your blog in the show notes, and people can go and have a look at the different ones. So that'd be really useful.
Cool.
So yeah, with it, it's like all of these things, just give it a go. But the most important thing is to keep writing and get the content available in the first place before you can, you need something to publish. So that's the other thing I was going to say, is people can get hung up on the other side of it. Mm-hmm. The technical side of it, and thinking, yeah, I'm going to be a self-publisher and I'm going to put all these things on. But you do need the work in the first place. That's the most important thing, is to write good stuff. And the other thing I was going to suggest was knowing your market, in terms of, like you talked about, specific stories like your vampire series and things like that. Knowing your market, knowing what's out there, knowing the types of word count and pricing, I'm guessing, as well, within your genre is quite important.
It's true. Yeah. Very much so.
So all those things are important. Maybe there are some people out there that have just started self-publishing or thinking about starting to self-publish, and we'd love to hear their stories as well, and see how they're getting on and what advice they've got for people that are looking at it, because it can be quite daunting for people if they haven't had any experience in it. And it's nice to know that there's lots of information that's out there, and there are people that can help you with it if you've got a bit of a budget. So the next episode, we're going to be speaking specifically about self-editing and editing in general for self-publishing, and why it's so important, and some of the options that are available out there for you. And in the meantime, as I say, people can get joined up, can connect with us. We're on Twitter at JU Podcast. We're on Facebook, Joined Up Writing Podcast, and on the web, joinedupwriting.co.uk. I'm on Twitter, which is Mr. Kelly2U. You're on Twitter, Leah?
I certainly am. It's Ileandra X Raven. Haha, see what I did there?
Nice. And you'll be able to see the work of Ileandra and Raven when I'll put some links up in the show notes to this. Obviously, we've been talking about self-publishing, and you'll be able to see how Leah does things, and hopefully give you some inspiration and spark your desire to try things yourself. We want you to keep getting in touch with us. Leave your reviews on iTunes. That'd be fantastic. Leave your comments on the show things. Check us out on YouTube. Let us know if you've got any ideas for these future top tips or quick bites or whatever we're going to call them would be great for you to come up with some better names. Would be a good start, but also some of the content that can be included in those. So that's it for this week. So thanks for listening to the Joined Up Writing Podcast. Let's get joined up. I'm Wayne Kelly.
And I'm Leah Osborne.
Happy writing, and see you next time.
Bye, bye, bye. Thank you.